Well, open your Bibles to the book of Daniel and chapter 2. We're at the brink of diving into that interpretation of the dream. But I tried to stir up some questions last time. We're going to touch on some of those again this morning. But I'll remind you, one, why would God reveal that dream? I think there's a spot beside your dad there, somewhere close by. Yeah. The question was, why would God reveal this dream to Nebuchadnezzar instead of directly to Daniel? Daniel's the only one who's going to be able to figure it out, of course, but why to Nebuchadnezzar? You know, God does some interesting things. I was reading this past week in my, I've got a little, not a devotion, but it's sort of a quick overview of the Bible read that I'm doing, and it's supposed to take me through the Bible in 60 days. So, but as an overview kind of thing. So it just touches on highlights, you know, and does sort of a skim through, but it touched on Manoah. Who knows who Manoah is? You got one hand. Who's Manoah? Samson's dad. But you know, it's a remarkable story. I mentioned to my wife in commenting about Samson. He wasn't the brightest tool in the box, but he was strong, right? But not the brightest one apparently. But again, love came in there, and then you know what happens to us men. Gone, city, right? So there's all sorts of things we can relate to. Right there, Tina.
Noah is the name for a church in Noah Plata, Paraguay.
Oh, nice. Well, there we go. Named after Samson's dad.
He's faithful.
Yeah. Yes. Well, he was. So, but the story is interesting because if you read it, you know, God shows up, and the problem was, of course, that Manoah's wife was barren. It seems like a typical one for God, right? If you find a barren woman in the Bible, you know a good story's coming, right? Because he's going to do something miraculous. Well, same deal here. Manoah's wife is barren. And the angel shows up and talks to her, right? And reveals that they're going to have a son, and he's going to sort of, you know, be this victor for Israel and stuff. And she goes and tells her husband, of course. And then, and with this, I have to laugh because, so his prayer is sort of, well, let God show up again, because I don't want to hear this, right? And God answers his prayer. He shows up, but he doesn't show up to him again. He shows up to his wife again, right? Why is he doing that? Well, I'm sure he's messing with his head in some way, just like he would mess up with yours if you're asking the Lord for something and then he talks to your wife, right? That's a good one for a man to digest. So, and then, but the funniest part, I know the funniest part to everybody, but to me was, so he shows up again, and then she says, okay, he's here. And then she goes and gets him, and then brings her husband over to the angel, right? He says exactly the same thing that he told his wife. He doesn't add anything new. It was word for word what he had told her already, and the same thing he had said. Is you got the same thing now. But now he heard it for himself, I guess. So now he believes it. I don't know, but there's some nuances going on in there that are very, very interesting how God did it. He's revealing himself to us in very interesting ways. And now he steps into Daniel's life, right? And he's gonna drop in a prophecy into the mind of the dream of Nebuchadnezzar that is going to have, it's like all-encompassing history of man coming up. And he drops it into Nebuchadnezzar's mind, right? And we ask the question, why would he do that? I mean, God's got his reasons, right? We won't ever be able to figure them all out, but some of them are going to be, you know, they're going to show up. We talked about this last time, of course. we're talking about the gifts indirectly. We're talking about the gifts that God gives you in this world for His service. Colossians tells us, of course, that Jesus Christ made us, and He made us for Him. Right? This is the biggest challenge that you have as a Christian, because you're pretty convinced in the flesh that you're made for you. I'm made for me. Right? So the things I do, I can quickly figure out where I want to go with this. I gotta help me, I gotta improve me, or I gotta do it for me, or me and mine, right? Well, God's work with us through His Holy Spirit, and that Spirit that He quickened in us when He got us born again, that His work is to refocus our attention to the things of me, to the things of Him. So now, all the giftings and all the things that I have been blessed with are to honor and glorify Him, right? Daniel, of course, has been given a very profound gift of interpreting dreams. But this isn't quite known yet as we step into chapter 2, but it is going to definitely become known now. And in a very prominent way, much more so than if God, of course, just dropped this revelation right into Daniel's head. And you understand some of the implication of this. Let's say God had done it, just dropped it into Daniel's head. And he's low on the totem pole at this point, in the start of chapter 2, in terms of the wise men. In fact, he was so down the totem pole, he wasn't even aware that Nebuchadnezzar had issued this decree that he was going to have them all killed. He wasn't aware of it because he wasn't in the area, wasn't in the palace, wasn't in the prominent sort of staff of the magicians and sorcerers and astrologers and you name it. He wasn't in the loop. No. So he's got to get clued in. He is part of the group, right? He's going to lose his head just like everybody else, but he's got to get informed. But if God had just dropped that revelation into Daniel's mind, and he said, "Hey, Nebuchadnezzar, I got something to tell you," how much sway would he have had, right? Well, that's nice. Good try, buddy. Great. And by the way, too, what he's talking about is prophecy. Well, the only way to figure it out if it's going to come to pass is have a lot of time pass to see if it came to pass. Right? So how could he even prove it? Right? I mean, I can prophesy all I want right now. If it's going to happen in 1,000 years, you guys going to prove me wrong? Right? So what does God do? Well, he drops it into a dream in Nebuchadnezzar's head. And scares him out of his wits. So now circumstances have been orchestrated by God that there is going to be no other outcome than God is going to be absolutely glorified because of the faithfulness of Daniel's response. Right? Somebody interpret this thing. And Daniel says, well, God's got this. I don't have it, but God's got it. And so they do that night of prayer, right? And then they come up with the answer. And of course, then that servant, Arioch, takes Daniel into the king, and that's verse 24. Let's just pick it up right there. It says, therefore Daniel went in unto Arioch, whom the king had ordained to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said thus unto him, destroy not the wise men of Babylon, bring me in before the king, I will show unto the king the interpretation. So it says, verse 25, then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste, and said thus unto him, I have found a man of the captives of Judah that will make known unto the king the interpretation. The king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, art thou able to make known unto me the dream which I have seen, and the interpretation thereof? Remember, that was a two-part request. It wasn't just the interpretation. He didn't reveal the dream even to any of the wise men, sorcerers, and so forth. Part of the challenge was, and I remember when we talked about this in some depth, but this is the scream, I believe that this is the heartfelt scream of every human being. just tell me the truth. I don't want the junk. I don't want it spun this way or that way so that you look good or you try to make something up. He said, he told them earlier, you guys, I know you can all do this. You could all give me an interpretation if I tell you the dream. You'll come up with something. I don't want a something. What I want is truth. How many people here would like to hear the truth when they hear the news? Goodness gracious. I mean, you almost can't stand it anymore. It's just sickening. And Satan's got his fingers in everything so much that it's so confused. And I can see, just tell me the truth. Right? So I'm not even going to tell you what the dream was. You tell me. If your God is so good, whatever source of power, whatever supernatural power you claim to have, if this is so good and authentic, then you can tell me the dream. And then you tell me an interpretation.
The other time we had a discussion, somebody, I guess, had heard that Nebuchadnezzar knew the dream, but I don't think he did because the desperation that he had to kill everybody.
Yeah, there is some good supporting stuff for him not even knowing it. So I lean that way, but there is
If he didn't know the dream,
allowance for other things.
if he didn't know the dream, why was he anxious?
That's
That's my point, is that he must have
I think so.
remembered the dream.
But I think there too, God could, somehow his spirit was so stirred with anxiety from the dream itself. He was stirred up. It was like a nightmare.
Right.
But you can't, right, it's that kind of thing.
But I think it's a bit
You can have a
remembered,
nightmare.
otherwise he wouldn't be, that's why he's so motivated, because he knows the details.
Or the fear has lingered.
That's what the fear can linger.
Well, but I don't think it's a point.
Can we all identify though, like the fear or just the anxiety or the intensity doesn't leave you, that emotion stays
Right.
with you, but like why?
Yeah.
Well,
That's the details
yeah.
of the picture.
And there's options for either. I think it's legitimate. But the point is the sword. Alan, you want to say?
I had a dream about this church last night too.
Oh,
I'd be very, very interested to hear what that was and why it is so irrelevant.
Let me pray on it. I'll get some guys together.
That was weird.
Well, but of course, Daniel came through. Now, and in that act now, God had, it's Daniel's time to shine. Well, it's the Lord's time to shine, right? Using Daniel. And of course, Daniel's response is beautiful for that fact that he deflects, if you would, the praise to his God. And this is where we get into trouble too, because sometimes we're more like a sponge than we are a mirror, right? We absorb it, and then it puffs us up. But God would have us do what Daniel did, and that's sort of redirect it. He'll take care of the other stuff. He'll take care of our needs, even if it's evil. Usually, you have to work on that the other way, deal with the pride scenario a little bit. But, yeah, Daniel does it very well. He answered, verse 27, answered in the presence of the king and said, the secret which the king hath demanded cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, and the soothsayers show unto God. But there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets. Remember I talked about that word secret? And that particular word, Chaldean word, as I recall, is only used in this book of Daniel. There's other words that are interpreted as secret throughout your Bible and so forth in mystery, but this one is unique to Daniel. And that word, it is a mystery. It's a secret. Okay, so here's an interesting, I was just talking to you about Manoah, right? You know what Manoah asked that angel when he says, tell me your name so that when the thing comes to pass, that we can honor you. My understanding from that would be that he'd want to name the child, let's say, after the angel or something like that, right? And then the angel has sort of this not necessarily satisfying answer. He says, I'm not going to tell you something that's secret. He said his name was secret. It was a secret. He wasn't gonna reveal it. Well, this is a secret that is going to be revealed. It's a mystery that God is going to reveal. So there's a nuance to this word, but it means that a mystery that God is sort of going to look at revealing, if you would, under, of course, his guidelines, his boundaries and so forth. But that's what is going to be provided by this God. He revealeth secrets. Maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. Underline that in your mind. Because I got another question here, related to that first one in some ways, but why would God do this at all? Why reveal what's coming in the latter days at all? And now I'm going to preface this a little bit. If you do not have the proper understanding of who God is, that is a biblical definition of God, then biblical prophecy makes no sense. So you why? How do I step into this a little bit further? Let's say you've heard, I'm sure, in your lifetime, people say that death is just the end. It's just annihilation. There's nothing more. It's just, you're just gone. You're here for a bit, right? And then you're gone. Well, if that's the case, is there any value to revelation in this? Is there? There's not, I don't see an iota of value in coming to Nebuchadnezzar and telling him what's going to be world history unfolded for the next thousands of years if Nebuchadnezzar's going to be gone and it's just all done. And he will have his consciousness is just gone. He's evaporated from existence. That, if anything, the only value would have if God is sort of mean and wants to jab somebody with a little bit of malice. That's about the only thing I can come up with, is that you will sort of want to, you're not going to live. Maybe. You're going to lose. You're going to die. I don't see any value in prophecy at all unless there's an eternity that is at the end of this deal. I don't think for any prophecy in your entire Bible there is absolutely no value in it. Nothing. What difference could it possibly make if when you're gone, you're just gone? It makes no difference. You don't have to use something like prophecy then to do anything. It's of no value. Unless salvation. He has come to save his people from their sins. Unless that's true, right? There's no reason to say anything. A God of love, however, is trying, there's sort of four, generally, it's spoken of that God reveals himself in four general ways, general or specific ways. What are those? Some, Romans talks about nature. Number one is usually on the list is nature, right? The word, right? That's a more specific. Nature is a general revelation, more general one. The conscience. The conscience is God's writing his law sort of in your heart, if you would, but it's there. It's there for everybody. And I've often spoke of that as this is your ally. When you're speaking to someone about the gospel, God already put an ally in them that's working for you, right? That's why I often do this. Who's told a lie, right? Well, I don't have to try to convince you. You're going to be more than capable of convincing yourself. Yeah, I guess I did do one of those, right? God did that on purpose. that is a part of God's revelation, if you would. So you've got nature, you've got the conscience, you've got the Word, and of course Jesus showing up himself. Those are sort of the four primary.
Historical.
Yeah, right. But this is God of all creation stepping into humanity and revealing himself. Right? Why would you even do that? If it's just annihilation, if it's just we're here and gone and there's not, why? You know, look, he came to save his people from their sins. I'm going to say this. If that is only good for the people that are alive when Jesus is here, that makes no sense. Does it? What about all the history of people that lived before Jesus shows up? What happens to them? There's so many, everything becomes nonsensical unless the gospel is the truth. This is where I'm going with all this, right? There is no sense in any of this thing unless the gospel is absolute truth. There's no reason that God needs to come and show you anything. It won't help or hurt, I mean, kind of thing. There's no use to it. Unless there is a warning in it, because he loves us and doesn't want us to get into the depth and the punishment, to get hit with the wrath that's coming, all the things that he talks about, right? To save his people from their sins. And of course, even that phrase, like I said, what does that mean? Well, whatever's coming is going to have to take care of everybody's sins. Not in a moment of time, you know, when Jesus shows up, but for all humanity of all time. So you're talking about little phrases like that that are so profound in their implications, theology-wise. Prophecy is one of those things. It screams of truth. There's something coming that he wants you to know about. And the reason he wants you to know about it is because he loves you and does not want you to end up in the wrong side of history. Now,
Paul also goes in that direction, and he says, if there is no resurrection, you are still in your sins. So he also goes that opposite
Absolutely.
argument
Right.
and says how pointless that would be.
And what he's going to do now with Daniel is, through this interpretation, of course, but he's going to reveal just a massive, and it's essentially from Nebuchadnezzar's time to the end of time. You know, so, I mean, it's, yeah.
How then did it come about that this prophecy was recorded and that it is got handed down, whether from Nebuchadnezzar or Daniel, to us?
Yeah.
How did all that happen?
Well, absolutely, and well, obviously by God, we would say, right? You can tell already when you start reading through, as we have done, all through Old Testament history and stuff like that, but recorded history becomes pretty detailed by the time you're hitting the Babylonian time. These guys aren't just talking, you know, well, I think it's around, it's somewhere in these dates. They're talking, no, he came in June. I'm serious. They say he arrived in June 539 or whatever, and he got out of there in July. I mean, there's records that were being kept at that time already that were very detailed, of course, because language, writing, and so forth was all being, you know, developed and had got pretty sophisticated, of course. Yeah.
How do people explain, say that there is no God and there is no Jesus? When you ask them, how are you different than the animals that are around you on the ground? I mean, if you're just coming and you go whatever it is, that's what the animals are.
And Jake, I think that's what a lot of, when I ask the question, why do the prophecy? It's not a lazy man's tool. But it's doing, I would say that it's doing like the parables did. But what I mean by a lazy man's tool, if you just came and you were, you know, open to you know, watch Jesus do something fun, but you don't really care about your own soul, or, you know, you're not really there to seek, right? Or maybe they're there to test him, or there to, you know, heckle him, or something like that. That's one thing. But if you're coming here because you know your soul is screaming, why am I here? Right? Why am I here? If it's doing that, right, then your ears are sort of tuned in to hear, and your eyes are sort of open to see in a place. And that's what prophecy is doing. He is challenging you to define or describe or explain why it's there. Why have the book of Revelation? I mean, again, if everything's just annihilated and you have no memory, you don't even know you existed, it's just gone. Well, what a futile thing to write down. What? Okay, so you're trying to scare us? I don't know. Again, I don't see any good in it or anything of much value, other than maybe an entertainment part while you're down here, something like that. Marie, you
Yeah. Well, a thought came to me, this is God's story,
Yes.
and he's going to bring about to pass that which will cause things to happen, that it'll run all the way through the Revelations.
Yeah.
And that's how we will get to know.
Well, exactly. And part of that, Marie, is I'm in charge. God is saying, look, it's not just running amok, and it's just not spinning out of control and flying all over the place and just happen chance this and happen chance that. I actually am so in control, I can tell you everything that's going to happen from now to the end of time. And details, because he's going to come up with some details in here, right? And of course, Nebuchadnezzar, listen, at the time, in the present then, has no way to prove whether it's going to happen or not. He won't be able to, right? You'd have to live past it to look back at it the way we are, right? To say, well, did it happen or not? So, yeah, as much as he is doing it at the time, do you see how, when God does a thing like this, how it just almost exponentially becomes more and more important? To now look at us. And if you ignore it now, you could have ignored it then with some, well, whatever, just one other, you're lucky, I guess. I don't know how you'd even explain it, but, you know, maybe not. It didn't take very long before nobody paid attention here, right? We just slipped right back into the thing. There's a few hands up here, so.
Well, one thing I noticed, like, prophecy, you're right, that's an amazing fact, that if there's annihilation, then it makes no sense to do it. But also, if you see testimonies like Case for Christ, the word itself is truth, but for an unbeliever, if they will look and be open, he's already fulfilled it.
And that's the parable part of it.
He has proved his sovereignty. And for us as believers, I love prophecy because we just see it unfolding, and it just encourages us to hang on. And as things get harder, there's almost an excitement in it at the same time, like watching North America crumble. There's an exciting element to it, because God says, if you turn away from me, these are the consequences. We're watching it happen, and it just validates everything he says is true. You know, it's not going to be a political answer.
Yeah, I was headed on the same path, because I was thinking, now here's Nebuchadnezzar, and he hears the thing that he is going to be described as that head of gold. Well, if his thinking stops right there, and he says, well, we record the rest, but forget that.
At least I'm the gold.
At least I'm the gold, and Belshazzar doesn't know a thing about this. Remember, Belshazzar missed it all.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so let's just read a little bit further, then we're going to step into this dream. I said we were going to get there today, so we got to get there. No, it's okay. I'm as guilty as any here. So, it says, verse 29, as for thee, O king, thy thoughts came into thy mind upon thy bed, what should come to pass hereafter. And he that revealeth secrets maketh known to thee what shall come to pass. So all again, it's just speaking, this is all prophecy, stuff that's going to happen yet. Hasn't happened, it's going to happen. But as for me, this secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have more than any living, for the sakes that shall make known the interpretation to the king, that thou mightest know the thoughts of thy heart. Thou, O king, and now he's going to tell the dream. Thou, O king, sawest and behold a great image. By the way, I have to jump in here just because this was one of the points that's brought out. The detail that he goes into with describing the dream now to Nebuchadnezzar could have been done in a lot less words if, in fact, as soon as, like this, there is the argument. Daniel says this, Nebuchadnezzar, you saw this big statue in your dream. And he goes, oh yeah, that's right. How did you know that? Well, it would already have revealed that I know it. He goes into detail, all the little specifics. But this rings true to me in this way. When you have a dream, if you wake up and if you quickly try to remember, maybe you get a good piece of it. But I had one the other day too, the most profound thing. I didn't know what it meant, right? But all I remember is the last part. We were in a double-decker bus. We were driving out of this parking garage, and we drove off the ramp. I go, how did we get there? And I struggled because I tried to remember because it had been a long dream in my head. There were a lot of things going on, and all of a sudden we were at the top level of this parking garage, and then we drove up. But I knew there was a lot to the story, but I couldn't get the pieces other than that last thing, which probably was the last thing before I woke up, right? Probably from falling off the side of the ramp. That's right. But Daniel goes into very clear and specific details about this whole thing. This is what I would have liked to have when I woke up there. But Daniel wasn't around. So, the thing, it says, the great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. I'm going to read through this portion, then we'll step back in. The image's head was of fine gold, his breast, his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet, part of iron, part of clay. And thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet, that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain, and filled the whole earth. Okay, so, doesn't that sound like a dream that you had? It's like a double-decker bus, I don't know. It's just all this weird stuff, and then all of a sudden it changes into this other thing, and then all of a sudden now it's chaff, and now the wind is blowing that away, and you go, what just happened? But he's going through all these details, right? But it starts off as the image of a what?
An idol.
Idol, but a man, right? Yeah, and it's both. So, okay. So God must have fun. He must sit around going, I'm going to come up with a real clever one. And then write out a dream or something, right? Because I guess you could probably do it the way, I don't know about you, I was never a history buff. I've become more interested in my latter years, but I'm pretty sure that they would have had to wake me up most history classes, right? Burn. What? But go ahead.
King Nebuchadnezzar, he must have been maybe a thoughtful man, because in verse 30 it says, shall make known the interpretation of the king, and that thou mightest know the thoughts of the heart.
Yeah.
He might have been thinking all these thoughts already.
Possibly.
What's all going to happen?
Yeah, well, possibly. Or the idea too is that they're so vague and disconnected that he doesn't even know his own thoughts, like how they're matching what's going to happen or what isn't going to happen or whatever. But it is like a dream. It's all
It highlights involvement.
Yeah, but it's all just floating around there, and you can't quite figure out what's real and what's not. But I was going to say, in history class, you could go methodically through history. Now, God's more than capable of doing. He could have just done sort of a fast-forward film, right? Could have showed him this history and that history and that history. I mean, he probably would have put him to sleep. Didn't do it, like, going through that. But what the point is, he did this in a very creative, symbolic way, like a parable. It's interesting, right? It's like he is. It's actually beautiful in its creativity, but there is something. So you stand back and look at this parable, and you go, "Well, I bet it's about man." It's a pretty good guess, isn't it? Right? It's in the shape of a man. That's a pretty good start. It's probably about man. And it might even be about man considering themselves as a statue or idol to worship. Right? I mean, you're pretty good now, and you probably tagged two of the biggest points of this whole message. It's going to be talking about man, and if you would, the kingdoms of man and how glorious they appear, and especially how glorious they appear to man. And God is going to, and he goes through this, and it says, I mean, this thing was, what were the adjectives there? Is that the right word? The brightness was excellent. Right? I mean, I don't know how it says in your Bible, but it was just magnificent to look at.
Awesome.
Exceeding brightness.
Yeah. So
Enormous, dazzling, awesome.
exactly. So and we're going to sort of try to pull some of these layers of onion back a bit, but you know, the Babylonian Empire, if you read it, we talked about this a few weeks back, but some of its magnificence is unbelievable. When you would look at the Babylonians and what they had achieved and what they had built, you could see why he was the head of gold. I mean, it was just unbelievable what man had been able to do. Now we're here, and we don't even think of going to the moon. That's so 1960s, right? No big deal. I think they sent a rocket off yesterday, didn't they? Did the NASA send something else? I think it was going up to the moon again. Right?
Yes.
No big deal. They don't even put it on the news. But back then, look, you're living in the present, and you've never seen Babylonia, and you show up, and your eyes behold something. This would be mind blowing. What they had built. Somebody asked me some time ago, or I think maybe Agatha, about the Chaldeans. So I did a little research on that. I'm gonna read a little bit here. If I put you guys to sleep, somebody, their neighbor jab you. So because there's a lot of times when the Chaldeans and the Babylonians the word is interchangeable, it's sort of synonymous, but there is a distinction that has been described, and it made sense when I read it. The Chaldeans were people who lived in southern Babylonia, which would be today that's the southern part of Iraq. Sometimes the term Chaldeans is used to refer to Babylonians in general, but it also refers to a specific semi-nomadic tribe that lived in the southern part of Babylon. The land of the Chaldeans was the southern portion of Babylon, or Mesopotamia. It was generally thought to be about 400 miles long, 100 miles wide, along the Tigris-Euphrates. So, where are they mentioned in the Bible? Does anything come to mind? Abraham came from Ur of the Chaldees. That area, right? So now you got already a connection. These guys go way back, right? Abraham came up from. Chaldeans are mentioned multiple times in the Bible in both contexts, both as Babylonians and Chaldeans. And Abraham's father Terah, who lived in Ur of the Chaldees, was home to the specific tribe or people known as the Chaldeans. So it goes on from there. The Chaldeans were an intelligent and sometimes aggressive warlike people. And now it's going into some history. In 731, Ukinzer, the Chaldean, became king of Babylon. His reign was short-lived. A few years later, Merodach Baladan, also a Chaldean, became king over Babylon in now we're getting right to our time, 626 BC. Nabopolassar, another Chaldean, began what would be an extended period of time during which Babylon was ruled by a Chaldean king. And during this time, the word Chaldean became synonymous for Babylon. That's where it tied together because it was a Chaldean king of Babylon. And he was a very prominent one. This is when they expanded and just became this world empire. So that's where the tie-in became together.
By the way,
Go ahead.
just adding on to
Yeah.
the days of Daniel and Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar is that the famous hanging gardens, which is one of the wonders of the ancient
Yes.
world, was created by Nebuchadnezzar.
That's right, and they made magnificent wonders in terms of.
They're
they
still
were-
trying to find the
They're still
aqueducts
trying
that
to
fed
find some of
them.
that stuff, that's right. Yeah. So it's when it became synonymous. Successors to Nabopolassar were Nebuchadnezzar. So that's where we're at right now. Marduk, Nabonidus, and then Belshazzar. So all these guys are Chaldeans from that southern tribe, but now they're known as, Babylonians or whatever. So now it's mixed together. But there was a specific to it. So just a little bit. We're going to do that history thing here every now and then because there's so much history involved with this, and of course, not just history, but now projected forward to the future.
Yeah, it does connect.
It does. It always connects. Okay, so let's go a little bit further now into this dream interpretation. Oh, well, actually, I wanted to do the general first. Just the things that, if you were just looking at this dream, let's say that this was a Wiseman class. Okay? And you guys had never heard David's interpretation. I keep saying David. It must be just because it's a D. I don't know. Daniel's interpretation. But in our class, we have the dream. So Daniel was gracious to give us, a written description of the dream, and I hand that out to you guys. This is the Wiseman class. We're teaching you guys. And now I want to see who's brilliant up here. So what kind of things, just from that dream, what do you think we could get? Well, I already described something. It looks like it may be about man, or mankind in general, right? And maybe about idolatry, or something like that. I don't know, maybe, or magnificence of man, right? That part. So we've heard that part. Well, what about this other stuff? Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, the gold broken to pieces together. It's not going to last, right? You start going something catastrophic, not just a little catastrophic, big catastrophic. So you went from gold, silver, bronze, the brass thing, iron, clay, and then this weird thing. There was like this stone that was cut without hands. Back in the day, of course, that didn't happen. Right? Right? Something. How did you build Babylon? Well, you had slaves that went and cut stone. This was something very real in the minds of the wise men here. I mean, how do you get a hunk of stone? Well, you just go cut it. It's not like you go out in the wilderness and you try to find the right square. Right? You're not going at here. This is something very man-made. Is the point. You are going to go to the granite site, whatever stone you're working with, and you get your tools and you are going to cut it to the exact shape for the next stone in the pile. And then you get the next one, but you cut it with hands, many, many, many hands. And so this is just common understanding knowledge. This is just that's how you get your building materials. And now part of this dream is you're going to get this piece of stone cut without hands. And now you're gonna have to say to yourself, what does that mean? So in your, okay, Wiseman, this is your class. Jake's the first hand up.
Some people don't understand that people actually made these stones, whatever it is. I was involved in Saskatoon University, and I don't know whether you ever been there or not.
No.
Well, all the, basically the buildings are made from fieldstone.
Yeah, okay.
And on the dental college, when they did that, we did all the glass windows in that place.
Sure.
I was there in charge of that part of it. And the architect came in and said, well, this stone that the people were, the whole crew was up on the scaffolding with hammers and chisel and fitting all these stones. Eh?
Yeah.
And he says that to the stones, that this is not right. You're supposed to match the other buildings. And then the guy just said, it does, because I was the one that cut the other ones too. But they were, I know they're up with the chisel and the hammer, and they did the whole
And they put it up.
second bottom base, and that's what university is, the theme of kind of the University of Saskatoon.
Sure. See, and then interesting, you mentioned fieldstone. Well, the reason fieldstone became attractive to people, especially on the prairies, is because you didn't have to cut it. Like you go get a stone you found in the field and you bring it, and then you just sort of organize it so it fits into your fireplace wall or whatever. You know, you assemble it, but you don't have to use tools to cut it.
You just gotta trim them, but it
That's
still
right.
have to fit right, and that's
Yep.
what
So usually, even then, they would play with different shapes until they found the right one that sort of fit in. That's not what they're talking about in Babylon. They're talking about massive pieces, tonnage of stones that they have cut, trimmed, exact shape. And this one is done without hands. What does that mean to you?
Not man-made.
Something supernatural, or outside of man's ability, or something, you don't even know exactly, but this isn't a typical stone. How about if we just settle on that? Right? Yeah.
There's another general aspect of it that anybody with a little bit of logic would pick up, and that is that value is decreasing, stability is decreasing,
Oh,
and
yeah,
foundation
sure.
is the poorest.
That is so, yeah, absolutely. We're gonna get into that. But you're right, because you're looking at the structure of it, and it's so detailed, you know that there's something in that,
Yeah.
right? He could have made the whole thing of gold, for instance, like somebody might just do. Right? Coming up. But he didn't do that. That is, in the dream, he did not do that. He specifically made it out of materials. And it's interesting that, too, who makes a hammer out of gold? Why would you not do that, other than beside the cost? It's too soft. Yeah. So you have a finer, if you would, material, finer in its purity of value. Well, interesting, value. I find a hammer of metal more value than a hammer of gold, right? But in the world's economy of things, right, if you would, gold, of course, is the sought-after metal. For the glitz. If I want to show off, I use my gold hammer, not my metal one. I guess. But so what you're doing with that, you're going from a finer material to a less fine, and now you're down to the clay and iron. But it is also said that the iron is the strongest. So you're going to make a bridge, you're going to use steel, right? You're not going to use gold. Not just because of the value, but because you want the strength, with minimal material for strength. And so you can sort of see something happening there, but of course that's before this stone cut without hands comes and shatters the thing all into chaff. Which tells you that whatever this stone is, it's stronger. It's what? It's going to be more powerful, if you want to use that, than all the rest of it. So something's coming.
And
Right.
it equates the value of the clay equal with the gold.
You have come to a place, and this is sort of, I think, a very good point of this. You have come to a level playing field. What I mean by that is you're coming to an event where it doesn't matter if you were gold, or silver or bronze or clay iron, it doesn't matter. It will be the same result after that stone hits. So you have put together a whole pile of the gospel. You realize that, right? I mean, you may not have pieced it together yet, but you have voiced, if you would, if you're exploring this, you have voiced a big part of the gospel message. Why is the Bible here for us? Why is this book? Why did God give us this book? This is why I think he has fun. God has fun doing dreams and stuff like this. He goes, how do I make this I'm going to put my gospel into this thing. And he does this little statue thing and says, this is what man thinks it is, right? And then there's coming an end, the cornerstone, if you would, the stumbling block. Wherever you want to put that piece, that thing cut without hands, right? You remember, I don't know if you remember this, but in your Old Testament, God is going to tell them to build an altar, and I don't want you to use any tool on that altar. Right? Field stone. You're not supposed to chisel it, nothing. You're just supposed to make it without any hands, if you would. Chiseling it. That's this picture of Christ, the stumbling block stone that's coming. And it is going to, and by the way, it shatters the feet. It sort of takes the feet out from the whole thing. Are we there? And it's going to level the playing field. Doesn't matter if you were up there or down here. The chaff is the thing. That is the result. Now, why would God do that? Well, this is his heartbeat. Remember, I've often said all the way along, it's God's heartbeat to get the gospel, the Messiah's message. Okay? The Jews were going to bring the message of the Messiah to the entire world. And now they're in Babylon, in exile. I got a new plan. This one didn't work in terms of you guys messed it. We're going to keep this thing going though. And now he paints the gospel in a statue in Nebuchadnezzar's dream. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. And he's going to continue with it, right? We'll pick this up again next week. More stuff there. Heavenly Father, it's just beautiful what you've done with your Bible. You have woven that scarlet thread, as they say, of your gospel through it all. You wove it right into the dream, Nebuchadnezzar, to be revealed by Daniel and to that nation. And anyone that would believe could be saved. What a beautiful, beautiful message. Help us with that message. We're stepping into this wonderful Christmas birthday season. And that is your message all over again, through it all. We praise you for that. Help us to just send that message out in Jesus' name.